If you watch any sporting event around the world, whether it be the Olympic Games, perhaps the recently completed Women's World Cup, or Paralympics, soon becomes pretty clear there's no one type of champion. There's no one type of optimal performer. The wide variety of individual different characteristics that are on show by those human beings achieving greatness should come as no surprise really, because first and foremost, athletes are people. And people are different, just like you and me. There is no ideal athletic personality. That concept is simply just a myth. There's no ideal personality for life either. And no single characteristic, no single aspect of our personality is uniquely good or bad. Every single aspect of our personality has the potential to contribute both positively and negatively to a whole host of environments. But given that influence, that pervasive influence that personality has on thinking about how we feel, how we behave, what we do, it's vital that we understand it. And in relation to performance, which is where I spend my day job, it's important to understand how those things that make us different have an influence on how we perform. I want to talk about performance. I'm not just talking about sporting. There's a whole number of domains of life where human beings are required to perform at their best, particularly under intense stress and intense pressure. So understanding personality's role in that is really, really vital. And so one trait that has real relevance to the performance domain is narcissism. So when I talk about narcissism here, I'm talking about the personality trait that actually we all have to a greater or lesser degree. If you think you haven't got any of it, you're lying. You can miss it. I'm not talking about the clinical personality disorder, I'm talking about the personality concept. And when I talk about narcissists or high narcissists, I'm just referring to people who score above average on measures designed to tap this concept. So as I'm sure you're all experts in Greek mythology, I'll go over this bit quite quickly, but Narcissism is so named because it stemmed from the Greek myth of Narcissus. And Narcissus was this proud hunter who was famed for his beauty. And as the myth goes, one day he was walking along a path and he saw his image in a pool of water and was instantly transfixed. He fell in love straight away with his image of the self, his image of perfection. And it was so good, he was so in love with his own self-image, he couldn't take his eyes off it. And he ended up perishing and dying by the waterside because he couldn't take his eyes off himself. So consistent with this legend, narcissism has come to represent a personality construct that's associated with a grandiose yet fragile self-image. And if you want a scientific definition, often it's defined in the literature as a self-centered, self-aggrandizing, entitled, dominant, manipulative, interpersonal. Narcissism's got a really long and proud research history, both within within mainstream psychology, but it's also really interesting in the public eye and in the popular press. And consistent with these sorts of views, the research literature shows that individuals high in narcissism are hugely confident individuals. They're charismatic, they're charming, they're pretty inspirational, they're extroverted and outgoing. But as these definitions suggest, they're also pretty self-focused, they're vain, they're dominant, they're entitled, they're manipulative. Now, narcissism gets a bit of a hard time in both the research literature and the popular press. When you say the word narcissism, it often conjures up particularly strong feelings, thoughts. You might have in your heads right now images of people in the public eye. I'm not going to name any names because I might get in trouble. But it's easy to think about people that you might associate with this sort of trait. But I think actually it gets a bit of a hard time, sometimes unfairly. Like I said earlier, it's too simplistic to say that this thing is bad. Also, please don't think I'm therefore saying I think narcissism is a good thing. I'm not saying that either. I'm saying this is an aspect of our personality and we need to understand how it influences what we do. An easy sort of take-home image of what narcissism is about is that of the superhero. The narcissistic individual thinks they are here to save the world. They are a superhero and they will save the world of all its problems. So one thing that researchers have been interested in trying to understand is, well, given the fact that these people have these grandiose beliefs, are they actually supported by reality? In performance terms, does the narcissistic individual actually perform any better? In the 1990s, a number of studies were done in this area, and the simple answer was, well, no, not really. Despite the fact that narcissistic individuals often thought they actually outperformed their non-narcissistic colleagues, a shared study said, actually, there isn't really any difference. So you're left with this view of, well, people who think a lot of themselves actually don't necessarily perform any better than people who don't have the same view. But again, that's a slightly simplistic perspective, it's a slight oversimplification. So more recently, a more nuanced position has arisen that says we need to take into account context. So consider a couple of different environments. Imagine you're in this environment. This might be the World Cup final, 30, 40, 50,000 people in this stadium, there's billions of people watching worldwide. Imagine playing, imagine perhaps scoring a penalty to win the World Cup. Massively pressured environment, huge amounts of people watching. Contrast that with this. So this is treble, for those of you that are familiar with it. Imagine playing down here on a wet Wednesday afternoon in February. There might be a couple of dogs at best watching. Imagine scoring a penalty. The act of scoring a penalty in both of those environments is exactly the same, but the context differs massively. The first context is absolutely chock-a-block with what we might call opportunities for glory. You're in a pressured environment, the situation is difficult, and there's a huge opportunity for sort of public evaluation and recognition. This environment here has got absolutely none of it. Wallace and Baumeister, the first researchers to consider this position, said, well, narcissists are these glory hunters. They're obsessed with this idea of trying to gain personal glory. So they should be keenly aware that different situations vary in the opportunity for glory that they offer, and therefore their performance should follow. And Wallace and Baumeister suggested, well, actually, in the situations where opportunity for glory is high, the narcissist should be great, and when opportunity for glory is low in this situation, the narcissist should be pretty appalling. So they tested this in a number of studies. Forgive me, I can't do a presentation without a graph. So, one study, they manipulate opportunity for glory with pressure, or varying pressure. They find that when pressure is pretty low, you don't see much of a difference between people who are high in narcissism and people who are low in narcissism in terms of their performance. But as they ramp the pressure up, you get this really clear difference. The narcissists are great, the people who are lower in narcissism don't do so well. Another study, I had to show this given the audience. This is brilliant science, I think. So they asked a load of university students, they said, spend 10 minutes thinking of the maximum number of uses you can for a fork. And they said, right, in one condition, we'd spend 10 minutes doing this, we're not even going to take your answer. In another condition, they said, spend 10 minutes doing this, and we're just going to get you to self-mark your own answers. So both of those conditions really limited their opportunity for glory. And you see here the narcissist not really good at all. But in another condition, they said, we'll spend 10 minutes doing this, and we're going to take your answers in, we're going to mark them, we're going to put up around the university campus who's done really well, etc., etc. So they make the evaluation public. And you get this huge increase in performance, and the narcissists are really good. And these effects have been replicated by research groups around the world. We've shown it, and other people as well. And in various different sporting situations with both high-level performers and also novices, we've shown that the narcissists are great in some situations and they're lousy in others. So they're sort of match winners and they're match losers. The narcissistic individual is never quite good. They're either fantastic or they're lousy. And it seems to be because of the amount of effort that they put in. So an interesting question that might come from that is, well, there are some situations in life, or most situations in life will vary in their opportunity to gain personal glory. So if we take a sporting example, competition is where opportunity for glory is absolutely sort of jam-packed. But there are other areas of life that are actually really important, but their opportunity for glory might be lacking. In a sporting world, training is an obvious one for there. Training is absolutely fundamental for how an athlete performs. Yet training is boring, training is dull, training has absolutely no opportunity for glory. Think about it in the jobs that you do or the lives that you have. There will be situations where opportunity for glory will vary. All things being equal, we might expect that in those situations where opportunity for glory is lacking, the narcissist shouldn't be very good. So then the obvious question is, well, how do we get the best out of narcissists in those situations? So you might be thinking, well, narcissism is a bad thing, therefore we must dampen it down and we mustn't have any of it. And then if I take that view, again, in high-performance environments, the characteristics that might make somebody a bit of a pain in the backside, difficult to coach, difficult to work with, and potentially a difficult person in the team, might be the same characteristics that might make this person phenomenal under pressure. And if you try and dampen some of those characteristics about who this person is, you might actually lose the high-level performer inside them. So we actually talk to coaches about the importance of trying to work with the grain, recognise who this person is, try and work with it. So in terms of narcissism, we encourage coaches to try and think about how can you change the training environment to provide opportunities for glory for the narcissistic athlete. We also talk to coaches about trying to sell the idea of seeking glory in the mundane. It's one of our favourite sayings for coaches. Try and get your athletes to think about being the best prepared, the hardest workers. We're recognising that they have a certain set of characteristics and they respond to certain environments. We're trying to get them to work in that way. The research literature also shows that because narcissists crave attention from other people, actually the behaviours of coaches, as long as the narcissist thinks that they're getting attention from the coach, they're going to respond, almost regardless of what that is. So, this idea of working with the grain is really important, I think, in applied settings, and this idea of opportunities for glory and self-enhancement is something that's fundamental for narcissistic personality. So, yes, performance environments in performing really well under pressure in front of huge audiences is somewhere that these people can gain huge amounts of glory. But another one is in positions of leadership. So, I mentioned those characteristics earlier about charisma, charm, confidence, extroversion that are associated with the narcissistic personality. The research evidence also shows that those things are associated with effective leadership. But I also mentioned things around manipulativeness, self-focusedness, entitlement. Those things are also associated with poor leadership. But because the leadership domain provides this opportunity for glory, researchers have been asking for a long time, well, do narcissists make effective leaders? But given all those characteristics I've just mentioned, it's a bit difficult to say, well, yes or no, or maybe, or I'm not quite sure. So from my head, this isn't a very good scientific question. It's a bit too simplistic, it's not very comprehensive. A much better scientific question, which is somewhat Bake-Off inspired, is being led by a narcissist like eating chocolate cake? The chocolate cake model actually came out of work that looked at what it might be like to be in a relationship with a narcissist. So the idea is that in the first bite of chocolate cake, it's sweet, it's tasty, it's gratifying, it's full of flavour, and you really enjoy it. But over time, those same feelings of sweetness and flavour and taste sort of start to make you feel nauseous, and then eventually will make you throw up. So people suggested, well, maybe that's what it's like to be in a relationship with a narcissistic individual. And then leadership researchers kind of got a hold of that concept and said, well, I wonder if that's what it might be like to be led by someone who's high narcissism. Maybe they're great at the start, and then across time, that positivity disappears. And until quite recently, there wasn't really any evidence for that. So back in 2016, we thought we'd have a go at trying to test this. So we had people working in groups over a number of weeks, performing different sorts of tasks, and each group had a leader. And every week, or every so often, participants in these groups, we asked them to rate how effective they thought their leaders were. And you get early on, when the group hasn't been together very long, these narcissistic people are rated pretty favourably by their followers. Seems to be because at this point, this early sort of bit of group formation, the inspirational, the visionary, the charming bits come out, the appealing bits of narcissism, if you will. But then over time, those positive perceptions seem to get dampened a little bit. Until you've been around in that group for a while, and there's almost no relationship, or it's starting to be a bit negative. And then eventually, you get this pretty negative, this negative effect. So the chocolate cake model does seem to hold up empirically. That across time, the narcissistic leadership does sink, and what starts out as this great relationship and a highly effective leadership tends to disappear across time. So that potentially paints a bit of a negative view for the narcissistic leader. It says perhaps they're doomed to fail in the long run. You might think that maybe that's quite a good thing. But also, what's really quite interesting is in the literature, there's also other suggestions that perhaps there are signs of hope for the individual who's had narcissism. There's some evidence from a number of reviews that say moderate levels seem to be associated with effective leadership. There's also evidence from the business world that says that narcissistic CEOs who are able to temper their narcissism with just a small amount of humility are actually rated really favourably by their subordinates. And you might be thinking, well, that sounds a bit of a paradox, the idea of narcissism and humility. And I'm not talking about massive amounts of modesty and being humble. It's the idea that perhaps a small increase, a small change in that might make a massive difference. It's not difficult to see how the idea of a combination of charisma and confidence and a desire to take risks, coupled with humility and actually caring about other people, might be a really powerful cocktail for effective leadership. So I guess I'll return to a couple of my points earlier to say that it's too simplistic to say that this concept is good or bad. We need to understand the conditions or the presence or the absence of other factors in terms of when narcissism might be associated with more pro-social, anti-social ends, or more or less effective performance and leadership. Thanks very much.